Hello and welcome to this tutorial on exposure blending. My name is Al Conant. I can be found on the web at www.alconantphotography.com. You can also find me on Facebook. Exposure blending is a workflow technique I use when developing my landscape photography. It requires that you work with raw images. I only shoot raw. My camera gives me a 14-bit raw image, which gives me up to 4.3 trillion colors. Were I to shoot in JPEG mode, I would only get an 8-bit image and be limited to 16.9 million colors. You do end up with bigger files shooting RAW, but memory is cheap. Currently, I'm using two 64 gigabyte cards in my camera. That's good for over 3,000 images. That's a good day of shooting. The cards are relatively cheap, and if you compare it to what it used to cost in the film days to shoot 3,000 images, it's pennies. I recommend shooting RAW. There's very little disadvantage. Some older cameras, there might be a speed issue if you're doing sports, but for the most part, I would default to shooting RAW 99.9% of the time. And now for exposure blending. Obviously, you can see I'm working with Photoshop. I'm sure there's ways to do this with other editors, but I'm a Photoshop guy, and this is my workflow. Let's select an image. This technique works really great with landscapes. You can do it with other types of photography, but this is where I use it the most. So let's pick this. This is an image from a trip I took up into Berlin, New Hampshire in 2017, up in the Errol area, Route 16, I believe. It was such a beautiful area. I found myself constantly pulling over wherever I could and taking pictures of just the beautiful landscapes up there. So this is a simple landscape, not the best one I took, but I just wanted to take an average photo and show you what you can do when you blend the exposures of the same image multiple times. Just like your normal camera raw workflow, I'm just going to use this to develop or set the exposure of this image, but with one difference. I'm just going to develop or expose for the sky. So I like my images to have a lot of contrast. I think it makes everything pop. So I'm going to crank it up on the high side. Like to throw in a little bit of clarity, definitely not as much as the contrast, but somewhere between 20 and 30 usually works for me. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to pull out some character. I want to see those clouds in the sky. So first thing I'm going to do is just bring down the highlights, see what that gets me. I'm going to bring down the exposure a little bit. Just want to see some of that blue in the sky. Okay, you see how the trees are getting muddy? I would not want the trees to look like this in the final image, but right now we're just developing for the sky. So maybe I'll pop over into the color sliders. Let me see what. Now you can really get carried away here, and it looks terrible quick. And then look at the haloing you get on the trees. So I might bring the luminance and the blues down a little bit to bring a little more character out, a little more. Make those clouds pop. Yeah, the cyan isn't doing too much for me. And I find that I brought that down to minus 17. I'm going to back it off. I find in Photoshop in everything that if you set it to where it looks good initially, back it off a little bit because it's probably a little bit too much. You'll notice it later. Let's see if I play with saturation a little bit, maybe bring it up a tiny bit. Again, this is where you can go really wrong really quick. So just a little does a lot. Okay, I'm happy with the sky there. And now, this is when you would normally just open the image. But if you press Shift, you see it turns to open object. Unshifted, open image. Shifted, open object. This is the important part. So now I'm going to click this. And now I have my image in Photoshop, and it's opened up as a smart object. Okay. Now, this is my sky layer. If I right click, I want to look for New Smart Object via Copy. Horrible name, powerful results. So now that gives me a duplicate. They both look the same. If I turn this off, it's the exact same. But being a smart object, what I can do is I can double click and I can get back into Camera Raw. Okay, now I'm going to leave my contrast and my clarity the same because I don't want that to change. But now I'm going to develop for the trees. So I'll go back in here and I'll double click on this to set it back to 0. Set it back to 0 because I don't want to enhance the blues anymore. Now I want to play with the greens. So let's see. I'll bring that exposure back up. See what the shadows will do for me here. Checking my white and black points with reference to the trees. Okay. Now come in here. Now though I'm adjusting for the trees and the green. If you come into the color sliders, yellow has a big impact. Can have a big impact in here. And again, usually a little does a lot. You'll find that you'll regret pushing it too far. Okay, so I like that better. Go back over here. And I'm going to hit OK. Now the two layers look much different. Okay, now from here I'm going to make one more layer because I have all this water in here and I want to expose just for this. Again, I'm going to right click, come up here, new smart object via copy. Gives me a third version of the smart object. And now I can come in here and I can change everything up. Let's go back to zeroing out the yellows and the greens. Double clicking on the triangle on most sliders will send it back to 0. Okay. Now I'm going to bring that down. See the clarity we're getting just by bringing that down. See the detail in the water. We're seeing some of this algae or grass down here. So I'm looking to bring out. I'm hitting option and I'm pushing it to see if there's any whites in the water. And then I'll eyeball it back. See what the shadow slider gives me. Maybe a little less. And now look how horrible the trees look now. Yeah, they just look terrible. So I think right now I'm happy with what I'm seeing. I could play with this area a little bit, but I really don't think I'm going to get anything out of there. I think I'm going to... I mean, I'll see where that looks best in all the images, and I'll pick the best one, but I don't think I'm going to get much out of that. I think that's just blown out. Okay, so now I have 3 versions of the same raw image. Oh, now that it's in Photoshop, now it is an 8-bit image, because that's what once you see it in Photoshop, you're usually working in a 8-bit space, or 16, but your final output will end up being 8-bit. So you can think of shooting RAW as having access to all this information that you know you're going to squeeze it into the smaller window. but at least you have it to squeeze it into that window. Okay, so now we're going to do one of the things that Photoshop does best. We're just going to make some masks and mask off what we want. So the bottom image, like I said, the bottom image is going to be our sky. Okay, the next image is going to be the trees. So what I want to do is I want to create a selection. Okay, I'm going to select the trees and everything below it. Just make a quick selection. And then we'll use select and mask to clean it up. Oh, I'll just get back to the quick selection tool again. I missed a whole big chunk in here. So add all this to our selection. There we go. And now we'll get into the refine tool. I'm just going to go right around the tree line. And right into these trees where you can see sky coming through, I'm just going to go right over those. And this does an amazing job of selecting the tree and leaving the sky behind. So once you get a selection, then you hit OK. And now you see your marching ants, you have your selection, and all you do is you hit the mask key. Okay, and now there we have that's the original sky that I want, and now I have the trees that I want. Next, I'm going to add the water that I want. So I'm going to turn that layer on, select it. Again, just use the selection tool, and I'm going to do a quick select of the water. Make my cursor a little bit smaller and grab that water. Pardon my voice, I have a respiratory infection and my voice is starting to crack a little bit. I haven't talked this much in a while. So again, I'm going to go over here. I want to separate the grass from the water. I think that, let me just go over here. I think that'll do. Hit OK. Have the marching ants, have my selection. I'm going to hit I'm happy with this. I like how this is coming out. This was a simple shot. Let's look at the original. Actually, you know what I should do? Yeah, this is what I'll do. I'm going to make another copy. Oops. Okay, this is one of the things you have to watch out for. If you right click over the image, you get one set of options. If you right click on this side of the layer, you get so I'm just going to make another copy. I'm going to double click on that to get in here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn everything off, because I want to have a representation of what it looks like with no adjustments, so we know what we came from, what we started with. Okay. So I'm going to option click on this layer. That's where we started. That's where we are. I'm happy with this. Only thing I might do is I would crop it to the size I wanted to output it as. If this was the size, I would do a Control-Alt-Shift-E, which gives me a composite of everything together, and which allows me to then apply the camera off filter, which is my favorite filter for adding a vignette, because it adds a smart vignette. And I'll do that now. I'll punch over to the Effects tab. I find that a vignette somewhere between 20 and 40 usually work. For this one, it's going to be on the closer to the 20. And if I find that to be a little heavy-handed, and I think I do in this case, I'm just going to adjust the opacity down to 50%, effectively making it a 10% vignette. It just draws the viewer's attention in a little bit. So now you might say, was all that work worth it? Well, I can show you real quick if it was or not. Okay, let's, I'll make yet another copy. Go in real quick, and on this I'm gonna set everything up. Okay, I'm just gonna develop this one frame the best I can for everything in the frame. So I don't want to lose too much of the detail in the trees. Even though okay, let's bring that down a little bit and let's see what I can bring back with the shadows. So I got my clouds kinda. I'll bring back some of the trees. Let's see, do I have a true white point yet? No. So I need a white point so it will print well. I need a black point. Got one there. There we go. It's not terrible. I mean, it is a developing raw image. So let's hit OK. And now, so that's the difference. This is if you just develop the one frame, and I like this image. It's not a bad image. This is a better image, at least to me it is. And the workflow isn't that hard. Photoshop makes it really easy, and I love the depth in this image compared to what I would have gotten out of the one frame. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, reach out to me with any questions. You can find me at alconantphotography.com. Communication might be a little easier through Facebook, but I'm easy to find. I hope you enjoyed this. Keep shooting and have a great day.